The ocean was like a vice, but he was coming up for air. It was pressing against his body, the weight of the sea forcing him to rise with the propulsion of a torpedo. Everything was murky and dim, but then Lee saw it. There, the spinning beam of the lighthouse breaking on the surface of the water above. Just as he was about to surface, he felt his arms move. He had control. He forced himself to surface, took a breath, and opened his eyes. He felt the sensation of coughing up water, but realized he was dry heaving. The diving suit was unzipped. The clasp of the chamber's padding was like the cold press of the ocean. He watched Gong buckle over in the VR pod next to him, helped down into a chair by the butler android.
"It's gonna be alright, fellas,"
Harris said, his bug-like eyes magnified in his huge glasses.
"They must have got you into something immersive down there, but I must insist you regale me while it's fresh. Do not let those portent visions slip away. We shall debrief. Captain's orders."
Lee let himself be taken down by the android. The diving suit was completely unzipped, and shaking, he stepped out of it. He kept looking down at his body. He expected to be soaked, but he was dry, bone dry. His police uniform looked crisp and perfect. He sat down, exhausted, drained, rubbing his temples with his hands. He felt his hair for dampness. It was a little messier from being pressed by the suit, but it was dry too. It just didn't seem possible.
"Detective Gong, you may debrief with Jeeves. I'm going to take our ghostly Detective Lee here back into the world of the living."
"Come with me, please, sir," Jeeves said and bowed. "Debriefing is the pudding of culinary arts." "Only you could have programmed this fucking thing," Gong said huskily, looking at Harris with tired, sunken eyes. Lee could tell Gong was completely disoriented, kept touching his face and body too, as if expecting it to be different. Unsteadily, Gong got up and followed Jeeves into a small office behind some whirring technical equipment and glowing projections.
"I know your feathers have been ruffled, old sport,"
Harris said.
"but me and ye only got a few sweet minutes until those initial memories weaken, and you need to give me as much grub from that dive as you can."
"I understand," Lee said, his voice quiet and croaky. Harris flicked and brought up a projected blank 3D document.
"What form did the dive simulation take for your transition?"
he asked intensely, his passion seeping through. "Water," Lee said. The document automatically filled with a placid lake under a sky. "No, bigger. An ocean, and it was dark. Night."
"You were dropped into it?"
Harris asked. "No, I jumped. I had to jump. It was voluntary. I was in the top of a lighthouse. You know what that is?"
"I do indeed."
AI will anyway."
"Real or imagined?"
"Not real, obviously."
"No, I mean, was it from a memory?"
Harris asked urgently, flicking the air. Lighthouses and coastlines and coves and beaches spiraling through the projection. "Memory," Lee said, closing his eyes. It was near Mantis Bay. The exact lighthouse and coastline filled the document.
"And you jumped out of it into the ocean?"
Yeah, over the railings," Lee said. I had to get down." A shadow man of tiny proportions leapt from the lighthouse and fell down into the ocean. "The sea was rougher," Lee said, "and I got into the glade as soon as I touched the water."
"Perfecto, maestro,"
Harris said, flicking the air, and changed the projection into a moving recreation of what Lee had been immersed in just an hour or so ago, in which the tiny shadow figure of himself repeatedly dive into the water.
"This about right?"
Harris asked. "That's it," Lee said. Harris saved it and moved the document aside, adding it to the case file.
"Did you get my message down there?"
Harris asked.
"That cost quite a pretty penny. Captain wasn't too enthusiastic, but when I got a taste of the code they were spinning, I knew you might need a friendly voice."
"I got it," Lee said, prying back into his memories, trying to make them vivid, clear, and in the right order. "I was a private detective," Lee said. "All of it was constructed. They had some way of wiping my memory, but it didn't trouble me too much. I had this sensation that I should remember more, but I knew I couldn't remember how I'd got there, but it didn't seem to matter, really. I didn't question it too much. It was incredible work. I could have just ignored it and got on with things, I think."
"And how about gravity and light?"
"Perfect," Lee said.
"Perfect?"
Harris repeated, licking his lips and pushing back some of his greasy, tumbling hair.
"Perfecto, eh? Pray tell about motion, ergonomics, scale, voice patterns, time, or weather. Were there any glitches giving the game away? Any tells that revealed the nature of this VR facade?"
"No, nothing Nothing that seemed that wrong, or if it did, I didn't notice it. Maybe the water ran a bit slower? No, there was one big tell that I noticed.
What?
Harris asked enthusiastically. Several different documents and streams of code swirling around him, moving past his glasses like a storm. They had clones, like androids, but they weren't androids, or I didn't know what androids were because that struck me as strange. It shouldn't have bothered me because we see cloned androids all the time, but when I was down there it didn't seem right. I thought they were all twins or something to rationalize it, but it was a tell.
That's good. That makes sense. The VR must have been so finely tuned to a previous time or a hyper-real reality before Android, so the more recent technology was unfamiliar. Yeah, this is incredible. Genius. They were actually able to change your perception to a previous space-time in line with your avatar, and they wiped your memory, but stopped your consciousness from becoming fractured as a result.
Harris put a hand to his mouth and started scrolling through the data, moving his body from side to side with the adrenaline, twisting his toes towards each other. You're getting distracted, Lee said, feeling the beginning of a headache.
Of course I am, old sport. This is very distracting stuff. You don't know what this means, the implications.
I woke up in a hotel room, Lee said, closing his eyes. It was old and worn out. The style was about 300 years old, well-aged already. I had an office next door. I got your message on some paper in a drawer. I had to look for Gong, but I had a client waiting for me in my office. She wanted me to find Illinois Slim. Saying the name aloud made Lee smile for a moment. That's funny, isn't it? You ever hear a name like that? Anyway, that turned out to be Gong. I had money and a revolver, a nice suit, all suited to the time. I walked out the room, into the hotel. Every door was different. The hotel was fluid, like it could change, and every section was independent. I even saw into a couple of rooms. Beautiful people everywhere, strangely dressed as I was. No children, though. Maybe that should have been strange, but it was a rough town on nighttime, so I didn't really notice, but some of the rooms in the hotels had futuristic styles, others seemed ancient. The elevator was a really old machine, but the lobby was new. Wait, something important. Two things important. The lady who brought me the job, looking for Slim, said that she'd called the administrators when it seemed I wasn't going to play along and get the money for her. I say play along because there was something so performative about the whole thing, and all of these hosts, that's what they called them, the staff, they were identical, but the guests weren't, and some of them were constructs, AIs.
A little bit jumbled, but I'm getting it,
Harris said.
Administrators and hosts, eh? That shall be crucial, me feels. What happened when you left the hotel? What was the world building like? The skybox, the clipping, the draw distance?
I don't know what that means, but technically, like I said, it was basically perfect. Nothing glitched, nothing was off. Everything was filled in with flawless detail. It wasn't like any other VR I've seen. It felt like it could go on forever. Every atom was accounted for. Nothing repeated, nothing was copy and pasted. Like, the textures were identical to waking life. There was architecture everywhere, modern and old, different houses, people in every scenario you could imagine, space vehicles alongside the antique car I was being taxied in. And all of it was shaking me up a bit, I guess, but I kept plugging the host with questions. I kept quizzing him, maybe too much, but he was helpful. I think the host can give us key information. It didn't seem that surprised I was asking him stuff all the time. They wanted to help. We can use them to find Hanshu, I think, but they must be programmed to serve the Glade, so we can't make it too obvious what we're doing.
Yes, and so you had driven through this fair and varied cacophony of culture and found Gong?
He was at a bar. The same bar the client had told me to look for Slim. Like I said, Gong was Illinois Slim. Something gave it away. It was a Gong. An actual Gong. There was this jewelry bar. It's getting vague. It was all like noir and seemed black and white. I mean, actually, maybe it was black and white, I think. The color was drained out of everything. A woman was singing. A woman with hair that really glowed.
Wish my hair glowed,
Harris said.
Keep going. I'll get the AI to fill in more later. But you need to remember who Gong is down there. You need to have it firmly implanted for the next dive.
I know. It was huge. Even bigger than real life. He was wearing this pinstripe suit. He had gold teeth, a scar. He had a woman with him, but she struck me as strange. Her eyes weren't right. She must have been a construct, an AI. Another tell, I guess. Her eyes were purple, but then it can't have all been black and white, but maybe just her eyes were in color. We had some kind of disagreement, but me and Gong, and it ended up being a ruse so our paths would cross, and Gong had been tipped off about me too. We ended up at the same bar, so...
Name of the bar?
Harris said, leaning closer. The Last Moon? No, the Blue Lagoon? The Blue Moon Brewery, Lee said, the headache building, the effort of the recall draining him.
All right, I got this. Take this,
Harris said and fumbled through his pockets, passing him some large pills. Jeeves brought him a glass of water and a napkin.
A chaser for the gentleman,
it said. Lee took the pills and closed his eyes.
Methinks me senses progress me does,
Harris said.
The Electric Glade compiles from your avatar memories and desires into projected ideals of the self.
He began flicking quickly in the air, and a projection of a private investigator from a historical film flickered in thin light. Lee closed his eyes and rubbed his temples.
The grim feeling shall pass,
Harris said.
You'll be fine and dandy soon, begging me to send you back under. This is genius stuff, really. Now I'm just going to compile what we've got from Gong and get something together and get it over the captain's way. She'll want to debrief, and this is going to take some heavyweight defragmentation.
Harris walked over to another console, jumping from one foot to the other. Lee watched his huge glasses spin like pinwheels in the projected beams of scenarios, data, and imagery. Lee put a hand to his neck, feeling his pulse. Whatever Harris had given him was kicking in fast. It felt like a cool wet towel was being placed on the back of his neck. I wish he could just download all this straight from my mind or something, he said. Just take it out of my head like a film.
Yes, but memories are not composed of objective matter, old sport,
Harris muttered.
If memories had mass, people with more thoughts would have heavier heads. If I'd solve that problem, you think I'd be down in this police dungeon?
Been down here so long sunlight burns me,
he added, in a gremlin-like voice.
We cannot convert the simulated imagery inside one's own brain into external matter that can be represented in light and sound. Think about it, man.
But you can share an experience in VR, Lee said.
Yes, but you never leave your brain, do you?
Harris said.
Whatever happens down there stays down there. It's a simulation. You can share it like watching a movie. It's a collective illusion in waking life, but it's just an illusion of the senses all the same.
Unless you fracture. Then it all merges, in a way, doesn't it? Lee said. Harris looked over at him.
Yes, well, there is that, but it's not shared, thus the madness.
He watched Lee for a few moments. Then a twirling projection of a smoke-filled bar full of waitresses and gamblers got his attention. He started augmenting the scene.
Look, this is going to take me a few hours to compile and get ready for the captain. I don't think there's much more we can get right now. I think you two gentlemen need to get down to a cop bar, or even better your abodes, and get yourselves ready for round 2. We're gonna be having quite an adventure tomorrow, methinks, and believe me, you're gonna need to be ready for it.
Gong walked back over to them, looking rough and tired. Shit, that was some trip. Haven't gone that deep since I was in Narcotics.
This is something far deeper than a simple chemical confabulation,
Harris said. Whatever it was, started with a threesome and ended with me slapping Lee in the face, Gong said. Let's get the fuck out of here. You good to clear that with the captain? Lee asked Harris, who was now distracted again by his 3D scenes.
Go get some nuts of dough coppers. I got works to does.
Gong started up the staircase towards the roof.
Air cruiser is gone, old sport,
Harris said.
Needed elsewheres. The AI brought you over a cruiser. You can ride share back. Like chumps.
Bottom feeders again, Gong said, heading for the rear double doors. They passed some technicians in lab coats down a sterile white corridor, into the basement parking lot. Just as the doors swung open, the car rolled silently before them. Lee stepped inside and got behind the wheel. He noticed that his head wasn't hurting anymore. Gong lit a cigarette and pulled down the window as they left the facility. They came out into a forest path surrounded by dense trees. The car sped along the dirt road. A giant electrical fence covered them like a tunnel, buzzing so loud they could hear it through the windows. The clawing towers of the city, wreathed in chemical light, reared up beyond the trees. You had your head on right, Gong said. I was in too deep.
Illinois Slam,
Lee said and chuckled. He laughed a little, then let it out fully. Gong looked annoyed, then smirked, then started laughing too.
Illinois Slim, eh? Shit, that was meant to be some projection of my ideal self, yeah? Mob boss or something.
Pinstripe suit. Fuck, you like that? Yeah, that's good. You like some of those lines I pulled out too, eh? Slipped them out like a fart between oil butt cheeks. Lee laughed again and felt some warmth and normality returning. He felt like he'd just recovered from a heavy hangover, been medicated, and left alone in a hospital bed to recover.
Starting to forget half that shit already,
Gong said.
Not the dive, though. Hadn't been expecting that.
The lighthouse?
What do you mean?
Dive from the lighthouse, Lee said.
It wasn't no lighthouse. It was that bust, the big one. Out there, past the forest. Countryside recluse like that couple with their carbon and their paper books. The children of you.
You were back there for the dive?
Yeah, for the transition I was there. All the way back there.
Gong flicked his cigarette out the window as the forest thinned and the first slums of the city outskirts replaced them. Up over twirling sky bridges, gleaming cars started to slip like schools of fish between them. Greasy windows and the flickering signs for eateries and vendors slipped by stained underpasses, countercultural youth in multicolored outfits passing on the road.
First part of that dive was real, Gong said. Felt real. Just how I remember it. Dream about it, like, sometimes still, yeah. Wake up, you know. Early, bad hour, not quite dawn. I've seen some shit, but that bust. Those children of you, that was the kind of thing our man Hand Shoes probably got going down there in the Glade. I was in a cruiser, not this one, model before, all black Moss style. Didn't have any tobacco from the captain then, but I was chewing on uppers, mild shit, but gave me a kick, eh? 2 large coffees and an upper, that was my breakfast, my pre-dawn fix. I came down at sunrise. 2 units surrounded them. We had enough evidence to shoot anyone who tried to flee. It had gone that far. I mean, some of these movements, some of these new age fads, these fucking cults. I mean, they grow and the more fuckers they draw into it. It's like gravity or something, right? And then they get hold of one wealthy family and it changes everything. Then they got the resources and the connections, and yeah, we know a lot of it's illegal, but no one presses charges and the leaders keep it all glued together without drawing too much heat, but not this time. This time, these bastards were ransacking the schools, soliciting universities, picking up loners, scooping up addicts, grabbing the lost children of the rich and famous, promising whatever they needed to make them whole. Well, the children of you picked up the wrong kid. A bit like Han Shu did, maybe. Maybe that's why I was thinking about it, why the dive carried on like this, yeah? This missing kid was the son of some big-time architect. Probably dreamed up a few of these monsters, and he called in a favour from the commissioner. Last building this architect made, his wife jumped from the roof of it, and after that he hit the bottle, hit it fucking hard. He was 18, about to go into the family firm, but after his mother went, he broke. He went looking for the underground, oh yeah, he went looking for it, and they were looking for him too. He had the money and the name, and he drew the underground to him like a fucking magnet. He got picked up by some young beauties that were fishing for the children of you. They gave him a good time. Recruited him, filled his head with their mantras, and by the end of it they got enough credits out of him to start building a fucking compound. The son started bringing in more people from his old firm, people who could build and had connections with contractors. After 6 months they had 10,000 of them. Then the sacrifices began. Children, Gong said and grimaced. Fucking children tied to a yew tree they had planted in the centre of their compound. They were slitting their throats at dawn. I came in just about that time. I drove fucking full tilt into the middle of that compound, and there was the sweetest little kid you ever saw, maybe 8 years old. A face half like my youngest daughter. Lee saw Gong's whole face twist with a rage he had never seen. That little girl was still bleeding on the tree trunk when I put a burning hole in every bastard I saw standing. I turned off my feed before I did it, sure I did, would have been gone for good, but the captain came on the scene and when she saw what went down, she got it. I executed that architect's son right here. Gong indicated to the back of his skull. After he surrendered, I put him on his knees and blew his fucking head open, and he thanked me for it, before the end.
You lived it again? Lee asked. He had never seen Gong like this.
Not all of it,
Gong said. They arrived at the street outside Lee's building.
But I came into that clearing again, and I saw that bleeding girl. I dived into her eyes. That's how my transition to the Electric Glade began.